Hi guys, Winters here. I wanted to do a quick video about the Horus Heresy and how to read it as quickly as possible. And I was originally going to put this video on deploymentzone.tv and put it in the top tips section, but it didn't seem to sit there very well because the top tips section in DZTV is tactical and this isn't tactical. So I thought I'd put it on YouTube. Plus there's quite a few people out there. There's a bigger crowd of people watching on YouTube, so there's more chance that this will find someone who's interested in picking up the Horus Heresy and hasn't yet, and wants to dive in and wants to do it without reading all 55 books. So in the time of filming, I think there's 54 or 55 books before the Solar War hits. And I've broken the Horus Heresy down as small as I can, so you hit all the important beats. So I'm just going to bumble my way through this in one single cut. So sorry about the and ahhing, but I'm going to bumble my way through it in one single cut. So instead of reading all 55 books, if you want to get into the Horus Heresy, how do you read the Horus Heresy as quickly as possible? Well, I've cut it down to 19 books. These books are must-reads as far as I'm concerned. Now, a couple of caveats. This is my opinion. There'll be 1,000 people out there who disagree with my opinion. Well, maybe even 10,000 people. More than that. Many people out there who will disagree with this opinion. But it's, in my opinion, the way to read the Horus Heresy as quickly as possible without going through 55 books, because there's a couple of books in there that are absolute stonkers and a couple of books there that you don't really need to read. And if you're a completionist and you want to read every single book to make sure that you don't miss out on all the little subtexts and all the little sub-stories that are going on, you're still going to miss out on some of the sub-stories, because authors being authors, they leave threads alone. They leave threads hanging there. And sometimes if you read it all as one long series, sometimes it'll pick up in places or start off in places. There's changes of authors, there's changes of background, where we are, what we're looking at. So some threads pick up and some threads die. And even if you read it all the way through, you don't get a sense of full completion. You'll get more of a sense of full completion, of course. And some of the little bits that if you read it in breaks, as I'm going to suggest here, some of the little bits, you'll be able to plug some of the gaps, but not all of the gaps. So the best way to read it, if you want to read it in one spank, is to read these 19 books. And I say it's my opinion. Now, obviously, starting off the top, it's the intro sequence. You must read Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames, and The Flight of the Eisenstein. The Flight of the Eisenstein, the first three books follow each other, one after the other. The Flight of the Eisenstein is the first book that goes slightly to the left and doesn't necessarily follow the main narrative, but it does tie up Istvan 1, it does tie up the opening sequence quite well. Some people have grumbled a little bit when they've read the Flight of the Eisenstein, but I think it's absolutely outstanding, the Flight of the Eisenstein, and it does dwell a lot on Nathaniel Garrow. And Nathaniel Garrow is one of the characters that pops up in the Horus Heresy series that's so good that later on he gets his own book. In fact, I don't think, apart from the Primarchs, I can't think of another character, single character, not even Garvey or Loken or Abaddon, or, oh no, Khan the Betrayer. Mind you, Betrayer isn't about him. There isn't another single character that pops up in the Horus Heresy who is so good and so popular that he ends up getting his own book, Garrow. I think it's book number 40 or 50 or something, which is not on my reading list, by the way, despite the fact that that guy is absolutely outstanding. So, Horus Heresy, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames, Flight of Eisenstein, you have to read them. Then the fifth book is Fulgrim. Now, it's the weakest book in the 19 books I'm about to recommend to you, but I'm recommending Fulgrim anyway. It is, after the first four, it's the first book that goes completely left of field and back in time. The first four follow each other sequentially. Fulgrim starts many years earlier, but you have to read it. It's tough going. Some people really love Fulgrim. Some people think it's one of the best ones out there, but it's a Marmite book. You'll either love it or hate it. But the reason why it has to be included in these 19 is because it deals with the aftermath of Istvan 1, and you actually get to Istvan 3, the drop site massacre. Or is it Istvan 3 and Istvan 5? It's been so long. Anyway, the second Istvan invasion. You have to read Fulgrim because it's the one that deals most solidly with the drop site massacre. There's also drop site massacre in Deliverance Lost and Falcon and a few other books. But the final third of it is the first time we see the Drop Site Massacre. So it's the ending of the first 4 books follow in sequence. The 5th book, not necessarily, but it does catch up to where the first 4 ended and finish the opening sequence quite nicely. It's really tough to get into, but once you've finished it, it does give you that sense of rewarding. So that's my first 5 books. Then we come on to part 2, the first part of the middle bits. So the first part of the middle bits are broken down into 4 books. 4 books which you must read. You've got the first Heretic, Legion, Mechanicum, and Nemesis. Now, you don't have to read these books. If you want to cut down the reading order from 19 to 15, you don't have to read the first Heretic, Legion, Mechanicum, and Nemesis, because they don't advance the main plot except for perhaps, Legion and Mechanicum do, but other things happen in and around the series, so you can get caught up with whatever's happening on Mars. Mechanicum deals with Mars and the Civil War on Mars. You just know, as the Horus Heresy progresses, that the Civil War on Mars is that Mars is split into good guys and bad guys. The Mechanicum is split into good guys and bad guys, just as the Imperium is split into traitors and loyalists. I shouldn't say good guys and bad guys, traitors and loyalists, or those that follow Horus or those that follow the Emperor. The same thing happens on Mars. You don't have to read any of these 4 books. But the reason why they're in there for me is because they're very good. The first Heretic goes way back in time and is often cited as some people's favorite book. It's actually one of my least favorite books in the Horus Heresy series, and there'll be some people spitting in their cornflakes right now because the first Heretic is really, really good and people love it. But it's got Lorgar in it, and I can't stand that guy. So I really can't stand it. It was so hard going for me. First Heretic's good. Legion, Dan Abnett. I don't really need to say anything else. It's Alpha Legion, it's Dan Abnett, and it introduces the Cabal, so which is going to have an effect on some of the main characters as the Horus Heresy progresses. Mechanicum, because Mars, because if you want to know about Mars and the Civil War on Mars, then this is the book for you, but also because it's got some of the most epic Titan battles in the Horus Heresy in it. There's often Titan battles in the Horus Heresy, but the ones in here are done really, really well. And perhaps, again, Mechanicum is a Marmite book. There's some people out there that don't like it at all, but I'm a big AdMech lover, and it is one of the first books that doesn't deal with the Space Marines as well. It deals with other stuff that's happening in the Horus Heresy, so it's an interesting aside. And then lastly, Nemesis. Nemesis you don't really need to read at all, but it's just too good to miss. It's about assassins. A bunch of assassins try and kill Horus. Enough said. Read it. Okay, that's the beginning of the first parts. And then by this time you're deep in the heresy. Where to go to next? Well, we need to go to Prospero, don't we? We need to find out what happens to the Thousand Suns and the Space Wolves. And some people have read 1,000 Suns, some people have read Prospero Burns. I would recommend reading them both. 1,000 Suns, they both end up on Prospero against the battle versus between the Wolves and the 1,000 Suns. And Prospero Burns is told from the story point of the Space Wolves. 1,000 Suns is told from the viewpoint of that legion. But 1,000 Suns covers more ground. It actually goes to the Council of Nicaea as well, and the Librarius Decree. So 1,000 Suns covers more ground. It's more of a sweeping narrative. And that's why I recommend it, because it gives you more juice, more meat on the bone that is the Horus Heresy. Prospero Burns deals solely with Space Wolves from Space Wolves' point of view. And people read it. Some people read it and don't like Space Wolves at the end of it. I think it's just Dan Abnett being a genius like he is and writing things so narrow-mindedly, so laser-focused, so fanatical, as fanatical as the Space Wolves are. Prospero Burns is good. I like it. So 1,000 Suns Prospero Burns will deal with those two legions there. And then there's another standalone book which you can miss and cut your reading order from 19 down to 18, or from 19 down to 14 if you've missed the other 4, but I would recommend it. It's called The Outcast Dead. And the reason why I recommend The Outcast Dead is because it's the first book in the Horus Heresy series that really gives us a look at the Emperor. He's not in it very much. He's never in it very much. He only pops in here, except for Master of Mankind, which of course is here as well. But it's the first one that deals with the Emperor quite a bit, and some of his motivations and some of his rationale. And another reason for reading The Outcast Dead is it's the first book in the Horus Heresy that's set solely on TERRA. So suddenly, after running around the galaxy for many, many years, or for the first 10 or so books I've recommended, suddenly we're on TERRA. The Emperor's in it a bit. He's like a bit character that pops in and out. And it's got Thunder Warriors in. And it deals with the Emperor's legacy from before the time of the Horus Heresy. So it's not necessarily a Horus Heresy book. It's more of a background. It's just good. Read it. It's a good book. Then we come on to the Imperium Secundus sequence. Jump all the way, and you'll notice when I put these books in out, by the way, such as the First Heretic, Legion, Mechanicum, Nemesis. The First Heretic ends, in the reading order. If you go to Wikipedia, it's the other way around. But read it in the order that I'm saying it. Anyway, Imperium Secundus. So before we start the Imperium Secundus sequence and find out what's happening on the eastern side of the galaxy, read Vulcan Lives. It's a very, very good book. All of these books are good. They're all 8 or 9 out of 10. Vulcan Lives is good. Vulcan comes into the Imperium Secundus sequence, and so does the guy who's been antagonizing him all this time. So you need it in order to answer a chunk of questions that come later in the Imperium Secundus sequence. And it's very good. It's worth reading anyway. It's got some classic lines in it. It's a bit brutal in places. Don't let your kids touch this one, but it's a great book. So Vulcan Lives, Know No Fear, Betrayer, The Unremembered Empire, and Pharos. That will be your war on the East. Know No Fear and Betrayer are 2 of the best books in the Horus Heresy sequence, either 9 or 10 out of 10s. Know No Fear, at one point in it, it rains super heavy tanks. And Betrayer, well, it's got Khan the Betrayer in it, so enough said. After the Imperium Secundus sequence, which marks about the midpoint of the heresy, there's very little books that I can recommend to you in the run-up to the Solar War. In fact, to read the Horus Heresy in as short a time as you can, I'm only going to recommend 2 more, and that's The Master of Mankind and The Praetorian of Dawn. The Master of Mankind has a lot of Emperor in it, and Custodes in it, and it is back on TERRA, and it's just very good. And Praetorian of Dawn is the build-up to the Solar War, is the build-up to the invasion of the Terran system. And it's, yeah, you need to read that one as well. It's just outstanding. And then that's it. Those are my 19 books. I'm flashing them up on the screen one more time. Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames, The Flight of the Eisenstein, Fulgrim, The First Heretic, Legion, Mechanicum, Nemesis, 1,000 Suns, Prospero Burns, The Outcast Dead, Vulcan Lives, Know No Fear, Betrayer, The Unremembered Empire, Pharos, The Master of Mankind, and Praetorian of Dawn. And that's 19 books out of 55. And then after that, you can pick up the Solar War, which they're releasing now. And that will be that's the best way to read the Horus Heresy in the shortest possible time. Now, again, people screaming at the screen, what about those other ones that are really, really good? The Raven Guard sequence, the Scars sequence, and the Salamander sequence are all honourable mentions. If you really like your Raven Guard, pick up the books with the Raven Guard in it, such as Deliverance Lost and Corax. If you really like your White Scars, pick up the White Scars books as well. If you really like Salamanders, pick up those ones. Old Earth, there's a trilogy of books that deals with Vulcan after Vulcan Lives. And Old Earth is, I just left out the list, but the ending's so cool. But if you like the Salamanders or any of those chapters, then pick up those books. Obviously, if you like the Dark Angels or Blood Angels, you can pick up Fear to Tread for the Blood Angels, and you can pick up the Dark Angels sequence as well. Unfortunately, the Dark Angels books are pretty weak, and Fear to Tread, the one covering the Blood Angels, is also a pretty weak book, to be fair. Ones to definitely avoid, in no particular order: The Battle for the Abyss. Do not read that book. It sucks. It sucks so much. Here's the spoiler. Bad guys build a really big spaceship, hundreds of times bigger than other spaceships. They fly to Macragge. It dies. The end. Damnation of Pythos. Do not read this book. It sucks. It's really bad. Here's the spoiler, so you don't have to read Damnation of Pythos. Iron Hands on a World. World turns to chaos and eats them. The end. See, it's just a standalone book, and it doesn't... Yeah. And the last one that you really should avoid is Slaves to Darkness. Slaves to Darkness. Spoiler, this is how it goes. Horus gathers together the Chaos Primarchs before the invasion of TERRA. One of the characters that we've been following for a long time dies. The end. But all three of them are not very well written, and they suck. So ignore those three. Just follow the 19 books that I've told you to read. Read them in that order, and you'll have a very good idea of the Horus Heresy. You'll avoid some of the stinkers. If you're a completionist, then read more. Go for it. But that's my recommendations for reading the Horus Heresy as quickly as possible. I'll shut up now. The idea is to make a short video, and I didn't want to rant. So what are your thoughts? What do you think of the list for people who've read the Horus Heresy? Are there any other recommendations that you think people should really read that I've left out? And if you agree with previous recommendations in the comment sections, then make sure you thumb them up. So if there's one that gets shouted and gets 11,000 thumbs or 2 million thumbs, then clearly pay attention to that thumbed up person as well. Please don't post any spoilers in the comment section. If you do, write in block capitals spoilers beforehand, because there might be people reading listening to this without reading the Horus Heresy beforehand. So I'll shut up. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Thank you for listening. Happy wargaming.